how or this argument just collapses consequentialism. If it is true that there's no difference between individuals, the logical conclusion from that should be that we would maximize them because that's the only way to attain more moral value. The course guard evidence is one proves that util doesn't actually take out util because it's not determinism. Rather, we do things such as aggregating, which is empirically proven that states using them. Second is that Send Bob serves as a check at this, i.e., the implications of ethics within the real world is how we actually verify whether or not our deduction is legitimate, which means Send Bob becomes a meta constraint on this argument on Gallagher. One is that this argument is not unique. We believe that we should not contradict the general principle that mutual purpose, i.e., that we should maximize individuals. Second is that the tailoring objection obviously takes this argument out because it begs the question of to what extent we verify whether or not something contradicts, which is sketching the context of the framework, which also proves it's not binding, and also on the also util solves this because it's empirically been proven that util has been used by states, which means also states can't consider things such as contradictions in the will because in most instances they just have to enact inevitably, which means util is the only thing that can answer things like the resolution question on Audi. One, this argument just proves that the anti-parameter is true because the only phenomenal introspection serves as a check. The only phenomenal introspection serves as a check, i.e., begs the question of what intuitions we apply to individuals. Second is term util is used by states and also found intuitive, which means it hijacks the internal link. Also, util takes out the and also util is both normative and acceptably accessible. A point is that it applies a normative principle to the epicenter world, while their framework is just abstract ideal theorizing. Second is that your framework is not capable of understanding the epicenter world, especially since the course guard evidence says that basing ethical theories on the material world itself is self-serving, which means the argument has no impact. There's no impact to any of the arguments in the underview since util is just an internal link to any of those. Also the Hawk evidence begs the question of whether or not those conditions exist in the first place, which means util is just a fundamental check against that, which means util comes to the question now. Contingent. One term, development assistance, is definitionally under the app establishes the unequal relation between wealthy and non-wealthy nations, where the only one is within a position of power sufficient to provide aid which is non-universalizable and outweighs on scope because it reaffirms the precedent of global inequality. Second term, it fails to combat the root of the problem, i.e., other nations need development assistance because they were historically exploited by wealthy nations. Assessing development assistance as intrinsically good, independent of that history fact, fails to assign culpability of wealthy nations, destroys effectiveness of the moral theorizing, also controls the internal link to the Audi 3 evidence because it begs the question of whether or not your application of the universalizable principle itself actually takes into account history. Third term, just because a nation is wealthy doesn't mean people living on there are wealthy. Those people who are disenfranchised within a wealthy nation are further exploited to help foreign aid, so which means always the applicant proves a misbalance between obligation to citizens and other humans. Also under a Kantian perspective, the obligation back to citizens always value the obligation to other citizens because those are citizens that individuals actually consent to under the omnilateral will. Also, their POC evidence has no internal link to the resolution specifically. They have no internal link why wealthy nations are uniquely an instance of resource over resources. Second, turn this argument intrinsically the nature of development assistance is when one nation is in control of the sovereignty of other nations, i.e., the nations that are taking development assistance are necessarily bound by the will of other nations, which allows for coercion to support, which means the NC establishes a coercive precedent that kills sovereignty of nations.
Wait, yeah, can you delete?
I just didn't read 4 downwards.
Just 4 downwards. So on contention, just 4 downwards.
Yeah. Everything else was accepted.
So not only aid, hampering, blah blah blah.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, ready for process?
Yes.
Okay, starting now. Alright, so what is like the burden of the negative under your framing?
Is to prove the consequences of the resolution are bad.
Okay, so you say that we have to prove the consequences of the resolution are bad. And then, so do the theoretical justifications come before your other justifications?
They come before yours, yeah, sure.
Okay, so so if I turn the theoretical justifications, would that like come before your substantive ones?
No, because then in that instance, the tiebreaker would just be a question of which framework is actually true.
Okay, which framework is actually true? How do we determine which framework is actually true?
By having a framework.
Okay, so that's it. Cool. Then let's see. You say on the Falk evidence that there is a controlling of the sovereignty of nations that receive development assistance.
Yeah.
What is the warrant for there?
So the argument is basically that essential to development assistance is that the nation providing assistance the nation who is receiving assistance, their sovereignty or their ability to maintain a status as a nation and develop as a nation is contingent on the development assistance from other nations.
It's contingent on the development assistance of others, right? But why does that mean that like they are at the whim of those?
Well, that's the definition of it, right? You will no longer retain the status of a nation insofar as you you are receiving.
Wait, so you say no longer retain status.
You cannot retain that status unless you are being given development assistance by other nations, right? Which creates an unequal power relation and allows for.
I'm moving on now. So you say that So like, there's a lot of arguments on the app that are just saying that like it's empirically proven that the government uses util. Like,
I mean, there's only one.
oh yeah, no, but like it's applied everywhere, right? It's like said on a lot of points. Like, what is the one to why government uses util?
Well, the Geno evidence proves that util governments,
Okay, Geno.
it's necessary for governments to maintain legitimacy. But
Okay.
also, I would say that that argument is not applied everywhere. It's only applied.
I mean, it's applied to multiple places. You say like on Audi, government is used by states. Actually, no, I don't need to go through that. It's whatever. It definitely is. So let's move on. You should say that. So like, what's the implication if the Kantian framework devolves to consequences? Why is that a reason why like the Kantian framework can't still constrain what consequences matter?
Because if it is true that the Kantian framework is contingent on consequences, then we would also care about impacts like the disad.
Why?
Right? Then it would be a question of which one.
Why would we also care about the impacts of the disad? Wouldn't the Kantian framework say that we only care about what consequential impacts apply under universalizability?
Well,
Did you make an argument that says that the disad threatens universalizability explicitly?
well, extinction is not universalizable.
Okay, that's your argument. Cool.
But moreover, I mean, the fact that it collapses to consequentialism just means that you use util, right? Because util is the only thing that actually takes a stance on which consequences are relevant. Because util is indexed to consequentialism, right? Kantianism is written in the stance that intentionality is the only relevant feature, which means it does not actually take a stance on which consequences are relevant, right?
Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna start affirmed now. Explain why, like, the non-continuity of identity means that we have to look at util.
Because we don't care about any intrinsic features of individuals or their ability to be free or anything like that. The only logical conclusion is that we maximize benefits across them, not distributions among them.
So is the theoretically justified util framework something that I can like violate as an interpretation if I say we should look to util, or is it just saying that there are theoretically good reasons why we
No,
should
it's
use
not a
it?
reason to drop the bidder.
Okay.
That's your question.
Alright, stop prep. I'm at 37 running. I'm going to send out the 1IR document. Okay, so the order is going to be starting on the AC with the underview. Then moving on to the AC contention, and then onto the NC.
The MC, like the disad?
NC framework, sorry. Forgot there were two ops. Alright. Let me open this up. Just tell me when you have it open. Alright. And specifically, I'll be starting on the 3-point of the interview. Everybody good?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Starting
Now, extend the interpretation, the negative must depend on obligation exists for well-conditioned to provide development assistance to other nations. He concedes the reciprocal negative burden, so that no obligations exist to redistribute. He also concedes the defending reciprocal burdens keep class because without negative generate the offense, without engaging the opposition and keep response because the offense have been burdened with the negative only has to point out errors. This is prosecuting fairness because if we don't have reciprocal burdens, then that's the definition of fairness. If we don't have reciprocal burdens, then there is no fairness in the first place because he has an advantage over the affirmative. He can have infinite reasons to indict the affirmative unless he has this obligation. The violation is that he concedes the cross-examination. The burden is proof that under consequences is a good thing at all. He also violates because he doesn't prove that there is literally no obligation to affirm. He just proves that the affirmative obligation is not an obligation. That's a good thing. So he violates this interpretation. You can and so far to extend the standards of reciprocal burdens, then you can drop the debater because otherwise you can't deter future advice and drop the debater because dropping the argument is not drop the argument is not sufficient because then they can continue to read it as a lots of time here on the anti-hero theory, and also dropping the argument just drop the debater because the dropping the argument means you drop his entire position because he doesn't need his burden in the first place. So also even if he proves that you shouldn't drop the debater on this argument, you can use it as a substantive takeout because this says that in order for him to actually meet his burden of the round, he has to meet this burden. He also needs an a priori in the affirmative says he can't meet this burden, which I'll get to him on the affirmative. Also, fairness of order because debate is a competitive activity without fairness, and then all the other arguments are in the round are constrained. Fairness because I couldn't engage them sufficiently to respond to them in the first place. Also, you can see that fairness is important in this TJ F util. So you have to vote for me on that interpretation. Then you can extend the conceded arguments out of the argument that says that theory draw the graph the negative, but not the app because if they want to use the arguments as the times two argument, you can extend that it goes conceded, and you can also extend that the app is disadvantaged, so he can't win any three arguments because he concedes 11% time bias, so he can't qualify against use claim. He doesn't qualify against any abuse claims, and he has to in order to have any offense. He also concedes that both sides have offense from tier theory. Then you always affirm, which means that even if he gets offense in the next speech, he doesn't actually win the round because I already have offense, and we would both have offense. In which case, you would always vote affirmative, so you can concede an 8 point for that justification. Now we're also going to be extending some other arguments on the underview. We're going to be extending the hop argument since self-underview commitment to all discursive exchange. Just means that before we can even engage in the NC and before we can even engage in debate over the NC, we have to have self-underview, which means that I'm going to have another a priori coming on the contention. So let's go to those a prioris of the app. So first, extend the Valentine evidence is the ability to observe this proof. He denies the moral agency of the soft scarcity. He only responds to the false evidence by says that there's no link to the resolution, but that doesn't matter because he concedes the Valentine evidence says explicitly that we have to redistribute resources. Otherwise, we don't have self-understanding. He also says that the nature of illness is that you no longer have agency, but one, he doesn't have a justification as to why you are actually bound by the will of the nation. He says that you are no longer a nation or no longer have the status of the nation. That doesn't mean you're bound by the will of the other nation. Also, you still have the status of the nation. You're just not a nation that has some sort of development. You are just not a nation that has the ability to engage in self-ownership in the first place. That's the Valentine evidence. That's exactly why we have to redistribute in the first place, which is and Valentine says it's key to self-ownership, which means that affirming is key to self-ownership, and self-ownership is key to having a debate in the first place. That goes conceded out of the affirmative. He also conceded another a priori out of the contention says the most basic universal reading of the universalizability principle mandates affirmation because negative non-universalized by definition. Those are conceded. You can also extend the conceded arguments that existential negatives are impossible because it's impossible to prove that something does not exist, just as you can't prove that a unicorn doesn't exist because there are infinite possibilities in the entirety of the universe for it to exist. He concedes that
what? Are you seeing his time?
Oh, wait, yeah.
Yeah, I have a minute left. Okay.
Moving on. So you can set that operators. So those are two independent reasons why you are always voting for me, even under his framework. So now I'm just going to be responding to the theoretically justified utilitarian framework. So you can't use that to hedge against theory on it. So one, term utilitarian has the least ground because given an issue under utilitarian, will only have one unidirectional offense that has functional evidence because the articles that are written about it will always about the empirical world, and the empirical status of the world is definitive. Second, term non-utilitarian frameworks will have ground on both sides without requiring finding of evidence because utilitarian allows you to make any argument that deals with utility. It requires the person on the receiving end to somehow pull up some empirical evidence on the issue of resolvability, assessing predictions of outcomes to infinite regressive. We can't compute all the outcomes of course of action. We need a heuristic method to approximate sign likelihoods with different heuristics, even different answers. So to choose the heuristic, we need to know how the outcomes are adopting, and we can't compute all those outcomes either. We have needed second order heuristics between heuristics and so on. So computation, you build index and assignment and probability outcomes. These impacts then always the principle you know unresolvable. He says my affirmative framework collapses to util, but that just means that you evaluate the consequences to universalizability first, and I say you have to have universalizability under Valentine.
You have to affirm for universalizability.
And 25 left? Oh, it's 25 now. So what were the operators again?
Alright, so the first one was the hot Valentine combo. So basically and then the next one was that even if you deny time that I get a drop the debater argument on the theory burden, I say that that burden is still necessarily conceded on a substance level, and thus requires that you have to prove the existential negative of the obligation of the resolution, not just the negative of the affirmative obligation. And then you can see that existential negatives are always impossible to prove because there's infinite possible basis for any duty, and the example that's used to explain it is the unicorn example. So like we can't prove a unicorn doesn't exist. Literally anywhere it could exist, and just because we haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, which is the same thing for any justification for some thing. So those are the two others.
Order is the case frame or NC framework, or a quick disadd NC framework.
Okay, so contention framework.
Then the a prioris.
Which a priori
and
first?
the extension of Hawk. Right.
Say again what we're starting.
And disadd quickly. Paradigm issues quickly on the NC framework, then extensions of the NC framework, then
No, it's just where we're starting.
Yeah.
Starting with
disadd. Yeah.
Also, did you say you were responding to the hop operators? Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
On the app. So I'll do all the signposting necessary. So.
All right, sounds good.
All right.
Wait.
All right. Are we good? All right.
First, the disadd was conceded. The case that the disadd was conceded. Individuals are passing of the plan that unifies the GOP, which prevents Democrats from winning back the Senate, which prevents Trump from being reelected, or allows Trump to stay in office, which risks extinction. That's particular evidence that weighs since it's conceded extinction impact. Now, the NC framework first overview is that you should use an epistemically modest paradigm, defined as multiplying the probability that the framework is true, defined the probability that often is true. The justifications for this are twofold. A point is negative strategy. One year is always able to do things like extend tricks as they did in the 1AR, which were not explicitly established, which allows for an auto lose from the negative perspective, which means establishing a new paradigm of epistemic modesty in terms of evaluating underneath their burden, which is not a violation of their interpretation, but rather how you should evaluate often under that interpretation. Their purport is essential negative strategy. Viewpoint is logically true. You never make decisions off of specific ethical theories, rather weighing the percent relevance under different ethical theories, which means even if they win that the a priori is true, you should still vote negative off the util framework, since there's 100% probability that extinction will occur. Now, the framing issue is that they concede the sin of evidence, and that is a meta constraint on any sort of deduction on what constitutes ethics, which means it still precludes the a priori, because the sin of evidence is specifically indexed to this claim, and also accounts for it, because it says that whenever we make an a priori deduction, that itself assumes that those deductions themselves stand the test of time. But sin says that the only way for us to actually verify that and verify the legitimacy of things such as inductions and whether or not they're applicable and have a moral weight throughout time is through induction, which justifies why utilitarianism is true, because only util has actually stood the test of time, and that actually just warrants why any sort of objectivity would warrant why pleasure and why we should maximize pleasure of individuals. That is the first framing issue and precludes all of their a prioris, because even it precludes all of their a prioris, because underneath their burden of proving whether or not the resolution is true, the sin of evidence proves that their notion of what constitutes truth itself is false, because the only way that we can actually discern whether or not ethical truths turn out to be true in the first place is through induction itself, which means that only utilitarianism serves as a reminder. Now, second is the paradigm. The second is that they concede parameters. The B point on top of literature, since most articles are written through the lens of util, that's a requirement. Which that means that not debating util precludes the possibility of other forms of education we can get from there. Top literature outweighs all the other things. Since ground begs the question of the direction of top literature, which only that answers the question of it. They say util allows for at least round one. No, this argument is not true. One turn argument is not true, because the question is not whether or not utilitarian literature turns out that way, but but rather second is whether or not the framework precludes certain impacts, and util does not preclude any impacts because util does not preclude any impacts. Second is turn the all topolar on things such as empirics are always one direction or the other. Third is that util debate is not always empirical debate, rather it's the weighing between whether or not analytic weighings and weighing between whether or not analytic warrants outweigh empirical warrants is also an essential feature of utilitarianism, which also takes out the resolvability argument because we can always weigh between different things and weigh between the relevance of things such as empirics and analytics. It's not analytics. Then they say that non-utilitarianism allows a ground for on both sides, which requires finding evidence. Obviously we impact turn this argument through the top literature standard, saying that finding evidence itself is a good practice. Also, they concede that education voter, which means that as far as we have internally back to education and fairness, that's still often back to us. Second is that second is turn this argument. So the second is turn that we still prove that finding evidence is inevitable, which only utilitarianism allows for us to do. Also, no impact on resolvability. A point is that grounds are always resolved inevitably. B point is that util is better for resolvability since it allows for individuals to do things such as engage in specific debates on which impacts actually outweigh now. The framing issues that I one that util is both a theoretical burden that we should util is both a theoretical burden that we should be and is also one that is true, which means you vote negative off of the NC. Also, given that we never make absolute decisions off of a specific framework. Now the AC underview. The AC put all the texts in one basket, but the issue is that the issue is that I don't violate this interpretation because their interpretation says that we just must defend that there's no obligation. But I just said that his question in cross-examination was just a question of how you index offense in terms of the NC. My argument is that the logical conclusion of there being bad consequences of the affirmative means that there is no obligation, which means that obviously that is not a violation. I read a different framework for you, but that does not mean that I'm contesting your burden. Rather, I'm proving that the logical consequence, or that because of the fact that the consequences of the affirmative as an obligation are bad, that would justify why you should vote negative, and that there is no obligation. Second is that you should prefer new to our responses on these issues, especially in paradigm, because there's completely sketchy, no implication of whether or not there are potential violations on this argument, so we don't know actually whether or not to respond to it. Now next paradigm is that you should prefer reasonability right line. Reasonability with the right line if you can concede the framework can go for at least link or impact turn grounds, which is stated with the link and impact turn grounds. That's proves theory is frivolous because you have substantive outs because you can impact turn the dissent or link turn it. Also competing interests incentivize you to always read theory and ignore substance, which means you only need a marginal offense. Also, that benefits the A-point strategy. Theory good supplements of the NC often supports me jump through nibs. B-point is substantive education. By definition, theory will take away substance, which outweighs because we only have 2 months to debate the topic. They're going to say that reasonability is arbitrary, but competing interpretations is reasonably arbitrary because a lot of judges aren't very good at flowing super high technical rounds, which inevitably leads to things such as intervention on these issues. Now, third is the counter interpretation is the converse of their interpretation. That benefit is the arguments why util is theoretically justified. Also, my interpretation includes their interpretation. We can prove that there's no obligation, just proving that in terms of the consequences of the action of the affirmative, which allows for more philosophical education because it allows for a broad scope of in different things. Also, solves reciprocity because you can still link an impact and consequence arguments. Now, the only relevant thing is the only last feature of the arguments that they can go for is this a priori argument. However, they conceded the response that we made in the 1NC to the Hawk evidence, which their a priori is contingent on saying that extinction precludes the possibility of individuals actually engaging in things such as argumentative ethics. That's the cross application of the Bostrom evidence. Also, the tailoring objection just proves that things being universalizable is irrelevant, which means that your extension of element has no impact insofar as in proving the truth or falsity of the resolution.
Starting at prep now. so the order is going to be AC underview, and then AC.
Okay.
And I will be going to like a lot of my talking about the AC underview will be talking about the TJF. So I'll tell you what arguments are on the TJF specifically.
Okay.
Okay. Is everybody good?
Yep.
Okay. Starting.
Now he concedes that the voter is fairness, and the fairness comes before education because fairness constrains what arguments we can make in the round between the divide. 100% straight with the fairness, and that means that all those arguments about education and why we should use the TGF of education don't matter. So you can send a conceded argument that says reciprocity has 100% strength of fairness, strength of difference because reciprocity is a definition of fairness. So if I would relate to reciprocity, that means that you're always going to be voting for me on the theory shell. So his only response is that I don't violate, that he doesn't violate, but this is a quote from his response to this. The app as obligations are bad. This means that his I mean to say that he means that the affirmative obligation shouldn't happen. He concedes that the interpretation says that he can't just show that the affirmative obligation shouldn't happen again. He has to show that there can be literally no obligation, which means that he doesn't actually need to. He can extend the interpretation that he must defend that there's literally no obligation to affirm the resolution. Then you can extend the reciprocal burdens argument. Then you can that has 100% strength of link of fairness. Then you can extend the conceded drop debater argument. Then he says refer new and the true responses to paradigm issues because they're sketchy. But first of all, one you can't allow new and the true responses to paradigm issues because one he conceded them out of the AC. He should have asked about them across examination. That I think that they were sketchy too. They were all very explicit. They were talking about whether or not there's an RBI, whether or not I get an RBI on those. I mean, so they're very explicit, so there's no reason that's why they're actually sketchy. They apply in every instance of theory, so that's not relevant. Also, the interpretation that was written in the underview said explicitly the negative must defend, which is wording interpretation. There goes the pen. Also, you say also there's no reason that's why you should get new in the true responses. You just say that you don't know how it's going to apply, but I could have just told you how it's going to apply. And this is also new in the true response. You have to be you should have made that argument in the one end, so I get 100% strength link of fairness. But also the main thing is that he doesn't win an RBI, and he concedes that even if he wins, that this is not a reason to drop him on theory. It's still a burden that applies to the substance of the round. That goes conceded, and then he concedes the other a priori that was specific to this burden. So you can extend the a priori that says that existential negatives are impossible, given that this is a substantive burden, and he has to prove an existential negative, and that existential negatives are impossible. Even if he proves that utilitarian is a good thing, you can never prove that an obligation doesn't exist. So that doesn't matter, and he still loses on that a priori. But also, I'm gonna still win the hot a priori because his response just doesn't make any sense. He concedes, so you can get the hot argument. The hot argument says that self-interest is key to discourse exchange. That's good. That's conceded. The 1AR, the application that he makes for this is a new and true application. Also, just the application that the analysis that he makes is an extension of the application. Is a new and true application, but because he expands on it, he doesn't make that indefinite argument against it. But also, his response just doesn't apply because my argument is that even before he could read this existential risk argument, he would have to assume affirmation. You can't say that extinction would occur unless you have the ability to engage in discourse in the first place. That's the conceded hot argument. It operates just on like higher indexical layers. So you can just extend the hot argument in the Valentine argument says that the AC is always key to having self-ownership in the first place. So the way the round makes down is pretty simple. First, I proved that I win on theory in the first place. You should drop the neg. I've already extended drop the beta. I've extended to have 100% strength of link of fairness, and that fairness comes before his arguments. And so that means that you always are just voting for me. But also you always look at the fact that he still concedes that it's a substantive burden, even if he doesn't prove, even if he proves that it's not a utilitarian, it's not a theoretical voting issue. He doesn't have an RBI, so he can't win as a theoretical voting issue. He concedes that you can't prove an existential negative, and then I've done easy implications as to why hop as a nib still means that you affirm, because in order for us to have self-ownership, which is necessary to engage the debate in the first place, you have to affirm for the conceded Valentine evidence. So the debate is pretty easy after all.
Cultivators from Michigan to octafinals in 2017 Minneapolis. That was a 2-1 decision for the negative.
I could just repeat the 2AR, but that's basically how my decision came down. I thought the no existential negs argument was clear as day from the 1AC. I was very surprised that he didn't ask about it in cross-ex because it wasn't squirrely, it wasn't hidden, it wasn't a new implication. To me, that was just very clear through the whole round. So whether or not the burden is a theoretical issue or just like a substantive issue, you can't meet it. So that's how I made my decision.
I can go next. I do not believe that it's true that you can just put those things in there when you have a standard and then expect it to operate independently of the standard in the second speech without giving the person the opportunity to respond to it in the 2N. And I do think that there are two separately above the standard arguments that are going on. One is this extinction argument, obviously, and then the other is this no negatives argument. And I just think that the extinction argument is way better developed, and it too is just clear coming straight out of the NC that he's going to say Bostrom extinction, it trumps all of it. So I end up voting on the disad. The criticism I would give to the dissad is, man, March of 2017 evidence about this, like this has to be from yesterday if you're going to talk about, and maybe it like no one actually engages the dissad, so it doesn't really matter, but to talk about North Korean nuclear war from any moment, especially when there's like, you know, this big Russian investigation happening now, there are like these intervening events that are huge. If you're going to read policy arguments and really get into the nitty gritty of it, this evidence has to be way more recent than it is, and that might just be a personal preference of mine. But I vote on the dissad.
Alright, so I have a response to the reciprocity argument on theory, which is the reasonability plus right line resulting reciprocity issues. I'm like I kind of like was struggling like what I should do as a result of I think that the negative is doing enough not to lose on theory. I think like the logical conclusion is that it's not unreasonable for the negative to attempt a like meeting their positional burden outside of disproving that an obligation can that an obligation can exist or like doesn't exist. So I think that I think I am comfortable like not evaluating theory because the concession of the reasonability plus the right line resolves reciprocity. You're conceding education, so even if I buy the like fairness outweighs your link to fairness has been resolved, the negative has made theory go away because they're assuming links to education. So then on substance, I think that the combination of the modesty argument, the extension of Sinababu means that like the operators are pretty suspect. The negative existential argument, you're just like, we're debating, that means you have to affirm. That like the analysis coming out of the 2N is like very good about like the method by which you're reaching that conclusion is suspect. You are like deducting or like deducing the fact that like the structure of debate assumes assumes self-ownership, but the Sinababu extension is like this is a meta constraint on that. The way that you're reaching the conclusion that the negative cannot meet this burden is suspect. And then also with the modesty argument, I'm pretty comfortable saying that like there is a question whether like under a true testing since like your argument is still relating to like an ethical duty to do the affirmative, that there is like a question of whether there is offense to your like a priori proofs of a moral duty, but there is a 100% strength of link to the like one framework within the context of the round based off the dissad and the extension of Sinababu. So I can vote on the NC.
Thank you guys.